Today is a very important day, as I am joined by a very diverse and passionate group of individuals as we continue the fight for those who have been wrongfully convicted. Wrongful conviction definition: a conviction of a person accused of a crime which, in the result of a subsequent investigation, proves to be erroneous. That's a legal way of saying that every so often the justice system in Michigan gets it wrong. Wrongfully convicted individuals have gone through the financial and emotional trauma of a trial, and in most cases, years in prison. We are honored today to have several individuals that survived this ordeal and will share their stories with you. There is broad bipartisan consensus that the wrongfully convicted deserve compensation, one that I firmly believe in. When a wrongfully convicted person gets released from prison, it is a major news event. Speeches on freedom, gratitude, and suppressed rage fill the 6 o'clock news. But for exonerees in Michigan, when the joy of freedom fades, the wrongfully convicted, number one, face a world they left penniless, and two, without any type of state programs that even guilty felons are eligible to obtain. They are left to fend for themselves after years of supervision and regimentation. Exonerees face tremendous difficulties getting back into normal society. Their work skills are outdated and society has moved on without them. 30 states and the federal government offer compensation to the wrongfully convicted. Compensation statutes vary widely, but most base compensation on the number of years in prison times a fixed amount. Under this legislation, Michigan would award to exonerees $60,000 per year the individual was in prison. The lives and reputation of these individuals have been devastated as a result of being imprisoned for a crime that he did not commit. It is time for Michigan to do the right thing and join the growing number of states that provide compensation. As you talk with the individuals that are here today, you will realize that there is no amount of compensation that can truly cover what they have been through. Without any type of compensation law, we are forcing them to endure more suffering and struggles when they get out. With the introduction of this legislation, it is our intent to help these individuals reestablish their lives. These exonerees deserve justice as well as compensation. I hope that this is just the beginning and we keep building momentum to fight for the rights of our wrongfully convicted and exonerated until this bill becomes law. I have with me today Representative Stephanie Chang, who is a sponsor on the House side, along with Martin Horgelak, who's one of the co-sponsors, and my good friend and mentor from across the aisle, Senator Rick Jones. I'd like to turn it over to Stephanie first for a couple comments, and then for Senator Jones to make a couple comments as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Senator Beida, for your leadership on this really important issue over several years. And thanks especially to the exonerees who joined us here today at the Capitol to share their experiences with you all and to explain just how this bill would benefit those who have been wrongfully incarcerated for years to come. I am proud to sponsor House Bill 4536, which is identical to Senator Beida's bill. And I wanted to just take a minute to explain why I support this issue and am so passionate about it. About 8 years ago, I began working on an effort related to ensuring adequate legal representation for those accused of crimes. And while working for this coalition, I met many individuals who had been wrongfully incarcerated, and a few of them, like Ken Winipko and Julie Baumer, are here today. As I talked with some of the exonerees that I met, or family members whose loved ones had been wrongfully incarcerated, I not only learned about some of the things that went wrong in their court cases, but also learned about the incredible struggles that they faced both in prison and upon their release from prison. I remember talking with Ruth Floyd Harlan, the sister of Eddie Joe Lloyd, who was Michigan's first DNA exoneree. He developed serious medical conditions while serving 17 years in prison for a rape and murder that he did not commit, and passed away just 2 years after his release. What could we as a state have done to better serve Eddie Joe Lloyd? I believe that it's our responsibility to make sure that we compensate those who have been wrongfully incarcerated. It was our own failures as a state that led to the unjust loss of their freedom, and we must do all that we can to help get exonerees back on their feet once they return to their communities, whether it be housing, jobs, transportation, or medical or mental health care. There are significant costs that come with adjusting back to society. And on top of that is the element of knowing that one spent, in some cases, many years for a crime that one did not commit. That's an injustice and one that I think we should work to heal. Michigan can do better to help those who failed. Thank you.
Former career, I spent 31 years in police work. Started as a deputy and retired as the sheriff of Eaton County. And I can tell you that it's very rare for this to happen, but when it happens, the only fair and appropriate thing to do is to make sure there's compensation to get the person back on their feet. And we had a case right here in Lansing, a horrible murder of a Lansing Community College teacher. Horrible situation, murdered and raped with an object. People called out, we need to solve this and put the guilty person away. And a mentally handicapped, a special needs man was picked up, convicted and sent off to prison. About a year later, they found out we had a serial killer. This poor man had nothing to do with it. My son is also special needs. So that story really touched me. I can't imagine the trauma that that man went through as a special needs person suffering a year in prison. So I think this is very appropriate legislation, timely, and it's time that we make it 31 states. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a number of different groups that are here in support of this. We're also very honored today to have the Most Reverend Bishop Thomas Gumbleton from the Archdiocese of Detroit here to say a couple words in favor of the legislation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm honored to be asked to speak here today. Actually, I've been coming up to Lansing for lobbying, for demonstrations, for protests, whatever, for the last 50 years. And every so often, something good comes of it. And I hope this is one of those occasions, because this is certainly an issue that we need to address here in the state of Michigan. As someone who grew up in Michigan, born here, lived here all my life, I've always been very proud of my state. I love the state. It's one of the most beautiful in the country. And the people are the best in the country. And yet we have this kind of failure on our part. The people who are wrongfully convicted, crimes they never committed, end up in prison. Then if they are exonerated, and it's buzzing that sometimes they are, but if they are, the state does nothing. To me, that seems simply to be an absolutely unacceptable policy for our state. And so I hope that the state legislator, under the legislation of Representative Wong and the Senate legislation that Senator Beida has introduced, I hope the legislature passes this and that we become a state who does justice for those whom we mistreated. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I mentioned, we have broad bipartisan support amongst a lot of other individuals. But we're also very honored to have somebody I was considered a friend, Craig DeRoche. He's the executive director of the Justice Fellowship. And if you'd like to say a couple of quick words, or if you'd like to just wave, that's good too. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you're welcome to come up. Craig and I served together for 6 years in the House of Representatives. He was the Republican Speaker of the House, and I have a great deal of respect for him. Even though we're on other sides of the aisle, we work together on a lot of things. I think this is a classic piece of legislation that shows that we can work together. There's a commonality in wanting to ensure justice for individuals in the state. Thank you, Craig, for coming and support.
Thank you, Senator. And just very briefly, Justice Fellowship is part of the Prison Fellowship, the largest prison ministry in the country. Justice Fellowship is the advocacy arm. And each day that this bill doesn't pass, we're allowing the injustice to continue in the state of Michigan. These senators and representatives before you are taking a strong leadership stand for people. And the real point behind the legislation for our organization in support of this is the government derives its credibility to hold people accountable for their actions only to the extent that they're willing to take responsibility for their own. And the government needs to step up and set a good example here, and these leaders are beginning it today, and we're happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. We also have a number of individuals that have been involved in the Innocence Project, both from the University of Michigan and also from Cooley Law School. I'd like to invite up Mr. David Moran. He's with the Michigan Innocence Clinic and on the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor Law School. And David, thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Senator Beida. I'll be extremely brief because I'm sure we all want to hear from the exonerees. Marlon Mitchell, physician from the Cooley Innocence Project, now at Western Michigan University, I had that right, is here with us as well. Between us, we have represented about 15 people who've been exonerated. We do have an excellent criminal justice system in the United States compared to many countries in the world, but even the very best criminal justice system occasionally misfires. And that's all this is about, is that when the criminal justice system misfires, should we, as the people of the state of Michigan, who are responsible, ultimately all of us, for that wrongful incarceration, be willing to do something about it? The National Registry of Exonerations lists only 55 people who have been exonerated since 1990, in the last 25 years in Michigan. So we're not talking about a huge number of people. But for those people, 5 of whom are sitting to my right, we owe them to do the right thing. And so that's all we're asking. And so I really appreciate the bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate for this legislation. Thank you.
We do have a number of exonerees here, and several of them are going to be speaking. But Ken Winnemko, who's going to speak in a minute, also Julie Balmer. They're exonerees. We have Danny Davis and Thomas and Raymond Hires as well. Ken Winnemko is from Macomb County, and his case was actually one of the inspirations in doing this. And Ken, if you could say a couple quick words.
Thank you, Steve. Before I say what I have to say, I want to thank Almighty God for listening, or answering my prayers, rather. Not only my prayers, but the prayers of my fellow exonerees, for listening to our pleas for justice. So I give my thanks to him first. Steve, Senator Beida, Senator Jones, Stephanie, and Bishop Wilkin, thank you so much. I want to introduce my 4 fellow exonerees here, okay, before I say what I have to say. First, Mr. Donnie Davis, our newest exoneree. Donnie spent 7 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. He was freed with the help of the Thomas Cooley Innocence Project. Julie Balmer spent 5 years in prison, wrongfully convicted of a horrible shaken baby syndrome crime. She was freed with the help of David Moran and the U of M Innocence Clinic. Ray and Tommy Hires spent 25 years each in prison for a murder they had nothing to do with. Myself, I spent 10 years in prison for robbery and rape I didn't commit, and I was freed with the help of Cooley. It's a sad day in our justice system when the justice system creates an injustice. It's even sadder still when that is allowed to perpetuate. That has to stop. But in the meantime, if you look at my fellow exonerees and myself, it's a sad point that I want to point out to you. If someone was in prison in the state of Michigan for a crime that they did commit, and they're released on parole, the state will help them get housing, job training, food stamps. If you were in prison, like the 5 of us were, and combined we spent 72 years in prison, the day that we are released from prison, we receive nothing. Makes no sense to me, and hope it doesn't make any sense to you, and that you will join us in any way that you can to get these bills passed. Thank you again for your attention. May God bless all of you.
I have to say, I've always been extremely touched when I hear the story of all of these exonerees. I've known Ken for a while, and how you can keep it together after such an injustice is really quite inspirational. And maybe it's ironic that we chose a National Day of Prayer for this, because oftentimes that's all these exonerees have had is a prayer, and that's important. But it is ironic that we're having it in that thing. we really want to find justice for these folks. I'd like to open this up for any questions of any of our either exonerees or myself or Senator Jones or Stephanie or any of the sponsors up here. If there's any questions from the press, I do want to thank you again for your interest in this. I'll also like you to, some of you are from our district, some of you aren't. If you could call your representative, your senator, and express your support for this legislation. That's very important. As you know, in Lansing, we are responsive to the people, and oftentimes people don't, representatives and senators may not have a focus on this legislation unless it's brought up to them. Very few people are impacted by this when it comes down to it, so it's oftentimes a little harder to get it on the radar screen of legislators to have it passed. But we're going to work hard on this. I'm very happy with the team of folks that are from both sides of the aisle working on this legislation, and I look forward to someday having justice in Michigan and looking forward to Bill signing on this. So thank you again, and if there's any questions from the press, I'd be happy to answer those, or to our exonerees or our folks from the Innocence Project, we'll be available to take any questions. Thank you.